Hello everybody, my name is Stooki and today we're going over how to play Enhancement Shaman effectively for Phase 4. I played the PTR extensively and most of this information is based on what I learned over the past month. Let's get right into it. Let's go over talent choices. This is your standard build with no defensive talents or raid buffs. You should only use this build if you have a Resto Shaman with enhancing totems and a Frost DK with improved icy talents. The next one, if you do not have a Frost DK or a Resto Shaman, then you will use this build to take the necessary raid buffs. And those raid buffs are Improved Wind Fury Totem, which takes place of the Frost DK, and then Enhancing Totems if you do not have a Resto Shaman. This last build is made specifically for ICC survivability. Since this raid is a significant step up in difficulty, it is recommended to take these talents if you find yourself dying to unavoidable mechanics or rot. You can see over here I took 1 point out of Call of Flame, put it into Elemental Warding, and then I also took a point out of Elemental Devastation. Another option, if you don't have any mana issues, then you could take a point out of Improved Stormstrike, put it into Elemental Warding. You can also take more points out of Call of Flame and Elemental Devastation. This one's more AoE based. This is more single target based. So like let's say you're doing a fight where a single target is more important. Then you could take another point out of Call of Flame, go here. You can just play around with it really. For our BiS list, I'm going to show you guys two different builds. One is the True BiS for spell power, and another is the True BiS for Wind Fury. This is the True BiS for spell power. These two trinkets are extremely good. I was able to get both of them in PTR. You can get over a 7k Fire Ellie with just these guys. It's very, very sick. Here is the physical. So we got double of the Lich King axes, DBW, Whispering Fang Skull. A lot of people have been asking me which build I'm going to go for, and I'm going to start off going for this True BiS for the spell power build. The reason I'm doing that is because I want this Royal Scepter in order to snapshot my Fire Ellie with the physical one. So like let's say you go physical first, you're never really going to get a good spell power main hand to snap, to pre-proc your spell power and snap your Fire Elemental. So that's the reason why I'm going to go for the spell power. The True BiS spell power is going to do more than the physical one, but I still believe that the physical True BiS with a fat Fire Elemental proc from the Royal Scepter is going to do more on single target. It's all down to personal choice, but this is just what I'm going to do. Glyphs are going to be a little bit different in this phase. Generally, this is what you're going to be running: Glyph of Fire Nova, Glyph of Flametongue Weapon, and Glyph of Stormstrike. Some fights will be long enough to where we can use our Glyph of Fire Elemental in place of Stormstrike. Fights like Sindragosa, the Lich King, you can both use Fire Elemental, although when progging on Lich King, I don't recommend using Fire Elemental Totem because you are going to not be able to reach that 5-minute mark for a long time, so just run Stormstrike for that. There are some fights where you can use Feral Spirit. We'll go into that a little bit later when I'm doing the tips and tricks for each boss. I'm going to go over enchants and gems, and also professions in this portion. A couple changes. One of the most notable one is that jewel crafting is back on the menu. The reason for that is because TOC, there was not a lot of movement for each bosses, so you'd proc your spell power, you'd snap your Fire Elemental, and all's well in the world. But in ICC, there's going to be a bunch of movement. Snapping your Fire Elemental won't be as important on most of the fights, so we're going to just have that consistent damage boost from the jewel crafting gem, so that'll be good. So it's jewel crafting and engineering are going to be the two that you want to take. For gems, one thing I changed up for my last guide is I'm using Chaotic Skyflare Diamond instead of the Agility one. This one, you do need both Nightmare Tier, and you're going to need Enchanted Tier. Where did I put that? Right here. In order to activate it. And yeah, I just found out you can use both of these in the same time, so that was pretty cool. So Nightmare tier and Enchanted tier are going to be your go-tos. We're still jamming full haste for spell power. The 68 attack power gems, they sim a little bit higher than using the haste ones. It changes with your gear, so definitely recommend to run a sim for those big jewel crafting gems, the 68 attack power and then the haste one. To see what your gems will look like in fully BiS gear, I'll post a link in the description with both the BiS sets and it'll show you. The physical one will go more into hit gems and expertise gems, where the spell power one will go into haste. Just going to do a really quick portion on macros and weak auras since much really hasn't changed from my last guide video. So if you want to know more about weak auras, macros, or rotation, go ahead and check out the phase 3 guide because I feel like it would just be redundant if I went into that in this video, just because it's going to be super long with all the bosses. But real quick, I added a melee range reminder. I'll put a link in the description for this one. This just shows you if you're too far away from melee to melee the boss. Since there's a lot of stuff going on in ICC, it's kind of hard to see the ground sometimes, so this just makes it easy. Another macro I added was, I went Horde, so I have this Blood Fury racial macro. This just activates your gloves and Blood Fury at the same time. I'll put this in the description. Other than that, all the macros and weak auras are the same as the last video. There are a few items that'll change your playstyle a little bit compared to TOC. Once you get this totem, your Flame Shock is going to give you a stacking haste buff for every tick. So this means during your AoE phases, you don't have to worry about weaving in your lightning bolt for your haste stacks. Now you'll just get them automatically with a Flame Shock. It lasts for 30 seconds too, so you should have this up at all times, no problem. Once you get this item, for your pre-proc set, you're just going to get rid of Dying Curse and you're just going to keep this on. And then you use your Phylactery or your Reign of Unliving right here, or whatever you got. And instead of like guessing or wishing that your Dying Curse will proc, you'll just be able to proc this on use for your Fire Alley Snap. For this phase, we're going to be having so much haste that you're not going to want to weave at 3. And if you weave at 4, there's a chance that you clip your autos. I like to send it at 4 just because there's a small chance that it's going to turn into 5 as I'm sending it. And that's like the best case scenario. But people are recommending that you go 5, and I also recommend that, unless if you want to send at 4 like me and be risky, but that's totally up to you. Alright, let's go over some tips and tricks for each boss, starting with Lord Marrowgar. You can use your pre-proc spell power set for this one. Biggest things are you need to be inside of the boss's hitbox so you don't get hit by the flames. So you can drop your Fire Alley right off the rip in the middle, not going to matter too much. When the Bone Spike Graveyard comes out, it's going to be in about 2 seconds here. We're going to make sure that we are Chain Lightning those, Fire Nova, break them out as soon as you can, because those are the highest priority when they're up. See right here, we're Chain Lightning, good. Another thing to note is to save your Shamanistic Rage for the Bone Storm and your Healthstone. You can see if you stay max melee range, right here you can see I'm far away. Look how big that hitbox is, so stay max range. Use your Shamanistic Rage, your Healthstone to stay alive. This isn't a very fun fight for Enhance because of the movement, but you can make do if you stay max melee range. Survivability is going to be the #1 thing and a reoccurring pattern for each boss. When he's out of range, you can always cast Lightning Bolts. You can cast your Shocks. Just try to stay as active as you can, even though the boss is moving around so much. Okay, let's move on to Lady Deathwhisper. This fight is pretty difficult on Heroic. We have, as a Shaman, since we do both physical and spell power, we can damage both types of adds. But whichever adds have Reflect, you do not want to attack those adds. You'll die pretty quickly. So you can attack any add as long as they're not reflecting. Right here, if you drop your Fire Elemental to the left right over here on the stairs, then depending on where your tanks are tanking the adds, it'll be a good spot. You'll be able to Fire Nova the boss, the adds, pretty much everything. So right at the top of the stairs right here is going to be your sweet spot for the Fire Elemental. You want to make sure you're purging the ads as much as you can, interrupting as much as you can. This fight again is pretty difficult for Enhance because of all the movement, but you can make do. You want to make sure that in the last phase you are interrupting the boss as much as you can. I convinced my raid lead to just let me sit on the boss and just do all the frostbolt interrupts, and it worked out pretty well for me. You can still chain lightning the ads when the boss is in range, so that works pretty good. One thing I did not do in this video that I want to show you guys real quick, the ghosts on this encounter are the #1 thing that will kill you and your raid. You can see one spawned right here. In order to see those ghosts quicker, you can change your video settings. So if you press escape, you go to options, and you go to graphics, scroll all the way down, and you'll see this contrast. Turn this all the way up to 100, and you'll be able to see the ghosts much easier. And you also want to make sure your camera is top down. This will also make it very easy to see the ghosts. So those two things, changing your contrast and making sure your camera is top down, will help you survive this boss. As enhancement, we do not have a lot of health. It's hard to survive, so you need to make sure you are dodging the ghost, or else everyone's going to yell at you. But that's pretty much it for Lady Deathwhisper. Alright, moving on to the hardest fight in this dungeon, Gunship. Just kidding. Just make sure to recall your totems after you jump over, so the boss can reset his damage stacks. That's pretty much it. Just recall your totems. Alright, Deathbringer Saurfang. A really good fight for your pre-proc spell power set, so make sure you use it here. One of the biggest things to note is your Chain Lightning does maximum damage to the ads. It doesn't take reduced AoE like the ability they have says. So right when those ads come out, you want to make sure you're not casting Chain Lightning until a little bit after the ads are damaged, so you don't pull threat, take damage, and force the boss to give out more marks. You can use Fire Nova off the rip. Works pretty good for when the ads come out. You want to save your Shamanistic Rage just in case you get a mark. You're obviously going to need to get mana, but if you don't need mana or anything, you want to save it for the mark for sure. You might even need your paladins to DI you, because shamans are so squishy. It's very hard to survive with the mark, and if you die with the mark, then it's a raid wipe. So maybe if you notice yourself the boss is at sub 25%, you have a mark, you have no Shamanistic Rage, you have no health stone, that might be a good time for you to tell your pallies to DI you, just to prevent a wipe. If you notice there's an ad that isn't slowed that's running towards someone that's ranged, you can use Frost Shock to slow it. It might even pull enough threat to ping pong back to you, so it gives the ranged more time to kill it. Overall, this is a DPS check. You want to make sure for your glyphs you're using Stormstrike, Fire Nova, and Flametongue. Moving on to Rotface, you can use your pre-proc set here as well. Pretty simple fight. You get full value out of your Fire Elemental totem, so try to maximize your spell power on that and snap it as best as you can. When the boss casts Acid Spray, just simply move behind him. Biggest thing here is to make sure you do not use Poison Cleansing Totem. If you're constantly cleansing the debuff inside of the melee stack, you're probably going to cause a wipe. So just don't have Cleansing Totem. That's very important. Other than that, you get the debuff, you run out to your tank. It's GG's. Super easy fight, in my opinion. Next up is Festergut. Again, pre-proc set works well. Same thing as the last boss, you're getting full value out of your Fire Ellie, so make sure you get a nice big snap. Our raid likes to do stacks, kind of like how Algalon, you move back and forth between the left and the right foot. That's all the fight is here. Want to make sure you get the spores when they go out. This is one of my favorite encounters. You want to save your Shamanistic Rage just in case if you miss a spore. You can use that for his big Exhale Blight, which is the most damaging ability. So if you're missing a stack, save your Shamanistic Rage, save your Healthstone, you should be able to survive here. If you get hit by these goos that are flying, it's going to reduce your melee haste, and it's going to grief your DPS, and you're probably not going to kill the boss, because surprisingly, this is a pretty tight DPS check. So make sure you're not getting hit by the goo, you're pressing your buttons, you're gonna be okay. Onto Blood Princes. You can pre-proc your spell power on this fight. Works very well. You want to reduce the amount of movement you do due to the stacking debuff you gain from movement. You can use your Ghost Wolves to increase your movement speed to walk out for Shock Vortexes. You can see we're about to get a Shock Vortex here pretty soon. Some of our melee players are running out a little bit beforehand to give us space. Then we go back in. Very simple. That's the thing that will kill you the most, the movement debuff and the empowered Shock Vortex. Unfortunately, your Fire Lake can be a complete idiot on this fight. You can see mine is attacking the boss that doesn't take damage. So try to put your Fire Elemental right on top of Prince Valinir in hopes that he will attack the right target for at least a small portion of the fight. You can help, you don't want to AoE these Dark Nucleuses at all. The tank uses that to reduce the damage he takes, so make sure you're not Chain Lightning those. Your Fire Nova will not hit them, but your Chain Lightning will. So be careful of that. If you have too many stacks of the stacking debuff, 11 is really freaking high, so you can see I'm just staying out. I'd rather do no damage and kill the boss than do damage and wipe the raid, so just be careful of your stacks. If you're not doing any damage, that's okay. Just stay alive. Moving on to Blood Queen, your pre-proc set is going to work here as well. You want to make sure you're dropping Tremor Totem for the air phase right here. I personally cast Chain Heal, works super well, keeps you alive no matter what. If you die with like hard casting Chain Heal here, then someone's too close to you. Never be in front of the boss right after this transition or she'll kill you. One thing that is super important, if you're using Bartender on this fight and you get the option to bite someone, you need to physically click the bite button with your mouse. You cannot press 1 or whatever it's keybound with. I'm not too sure why, but I hope it gets fixed soon. So just make sure you're actually physically pressing the bite on your action bar with your mouse and not using the keybound for it, because it just doesn't work. If you get the fire, you want to run out to the sides. If you get the pact, you want to stack up in the middle and break the pact with the other people. You can see Selchi has it, and they're going to run to the middle, drop it. Super easy. This fight's extremely tight DPS check. Want to make sure you're doing as much as you can. Next, I want to talk about Sindragosa, but before we watch the video, I want to talk about Frost Resistance gear real quick. So you can see that I am wearing the Polar Cord. I just put a bunch of haste on it, and then Titanium Frostguard ring. This is going to give you enough frost resistance to where you can keep attacking the boss until she does the grip, and then during the grip is when you drop your stacks, because originally you wouldn't be able to survive maybe like 7-8 stacks, but with this frost res I was able to go up to 9, 10, even 11 and survive. But when I reached 11, I would usually use Shamanistic Rage, but I'd wholeheartedly recommend like using frost resistance for your progression. It helps so much and it makes the fight feel way less clunky. It's extremely good. So Polar Cord, Titanium Frostguard ring, and then I also put a frost resistance enchant on my cloak for this one, just for a little bit more. Trust me, this fight is not a DPS race. It's all about survivability. Being, you know, enhancement, super squishy, so we need to do everything we can to stay alive. Alright, onto the video. You can see the Foji weak aura. It gives you a timer on when combat's going to start. You're going to want to use your fire elemental glyph for this one for sure. It's going to be about a 7-minute fight, maybe even 8. I think we did 8 on our last one. So definitely use that glyph. You're going to be able to fit 2 in. You can see as a melee you're generating stacks right here. If you're not using frost resistance, you can get up to like 6, 7, and then I recommend hard casting lightning bolt until it drops off. You can take like 10 stacks without frost res, but your healers probably will hate you. So it's totally up to you. Maybe ask your healers, see how high you can go. Communication's always good, but when this grip happened right here, it's really good to drop your stacks, no matter what, like you frost resist or not. Another pretty big tip when you get into the last phase over here When you're trying to drop your Arcane Buffet stack, make sure you're not melee attacking the boss. If you're melee attacking the boss through the Ice Tomb, then you're going to keep generating Arcane Buffet stacks. It's not good. The Frost Resist comes in a lot of handy right here. I'm also using this flask. It's like 55 resistance, I believe. When you walk to drop your Arcane Buffet, wait for the boss to do his little Arcane Explosion, and then you're good to go back in. You don't have to wait any longer. Here I stayed to help DPS the tomb a little bit, but once you avoid one Arcane Buffet, you are good to go back in DPS. During progression on this last phase, the raid is taking a bunch of damage. Sometimes it's a really good idea to use Chain Heal for your Maelstrom procs, or just hardcast Chain Heal behind the Ice Block. It helps the healers a lot. Again, it's not a DPS race, it's about execution and survivability. You'll find yourself casting Chain Heal on a couple bosses in here, but this one for sure is super useful. Having 2 enhancements, I don't know. We were wiping on this boss for a while, we brought Dr. Poopman in. He was chain healing with me and we killed the boss, so I'm not going to say enhancement's the reason we killed it, but we did. So it's honestly a terribly designed fight. Not a huge fan. Just to clarify, in this video, it's an older kill, so I wasn't wearing frost resistance, so you'll see I'm moving out after I'm hard casting lightning bolt at like 5 or 6 stacks to drop it, just so I don't die. But again, if you're wearing frost res, you can keep going higher and higher, like 10, 11. Unfortunately for Professor Putricide, I lost my VOD, so I don't have a video of me doing it, but I do have the log of when we killed it last. This is the worst fight for Enhancement Shaman, in my opinion. Sorry, my dog is... Alright. So, the boss starts here. The first slime comes out on green right here. You want to position your fire elemental like right around here, so you'll be able to cleave the boss and the slime. The boss is going to be moving around a lot. Your targets are going to be moving around a lot. I would keep your fire elemental up for the full duration. You don't have to refresh to Magma Totem at all, so I would just keep your fire elemental up. Even though you're not able to use Fire Nova, you're still getting the value out of the fire alley. Once that falls, I recommend using either Magma Totem or Searing Totem. So this is like where Searing Totem makes a comeback. The range on Searing Totem is huge. You'll get a decent amount of value throughout phase 2. So it might be a good idea. I would try it out, see how you like it. Some things to watch out for that'll really grief your DPS are Choking Gas. This is a silent killer. This can make or break whether you meet the DPS check in the last phase. It reduces your chance to hit by 100% for 15 seconds. So at this point, you might as well just be healing if you got this. These show up as little orangish vials on the ground. A little hard to see, but again, if you use that contrast setting we were using for Lady Deathwhisper, it'll be easier to see. So make sure you do not get hit by the little vials that spawn on the ground. They give you about a second or 2 to move out before you actually get the debuff. I recommend setting up a weak aura to show when they show up. That'd be helpful. And then the second thing that will grief your DPS is malleable goo. Be careful when you're moving when the goo goes out, because I would just wait for it to land and then start moving again. It's not worth either dying or losing your attack speed by 250%. Your Ghost Wolf speed increase is super useful, whether it be running away from a red slime, or you need to get to a green slime quicker, or it's time to switch to the boss. Any type of mobility is super useful on this fight. Just try to stay as active as you can as much as possible. So for the Lich King, unfortunately, like a lot of other guilds, we really haven't been able to progress past phase 2. The only thing I can recommend is when the boss is moved out of your fire totem range, your fire alley totem, just keep your fire alley up. Keep DPS on the boss. Just don't try to cast Fire Nova. Just prioritize Lava Lash. Your fire alley is still going to do a bunch of damage, even though it's not in Fire Nova range. Once you get the Necrotic Plague, just move to your assigned tank. Well, that's how we do it. You guys might do it differently, but it's extremely hard fight. We got a bunch of attempts into it. Once we do kill the boss, I'll be sure to make an updated video kind of explaining more tips and how we did it. Alright, that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all the support, comments, and feedback from all of you. If you have any more tips, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll be sure to update you all on future Shaman updates, tips, and tricks. Good luck in ICC, and have a good one.